This is CBC Vancouver News.
Though our investigation is ongoing, we now believe that the same man is responsible for 5 separate violent and unprovoked incidents.
We're learning more about the man behind an alleged stabbing in the city's downtown core yesterday that sent 2 people to hospital. Plus,
they deserve to live their last years with respect and dignity.
Living below the poverty line, why hundreds of seniors across the province are sounding the alarm over low pensions, not keeping up with the high cost of living. And
what happened to you cannot be undone, but it must be acknowledged and it must be atoned for.
Switched at birth. A BC man meets a man from Manitoba who was raised by his biological parents. The government now issuing a formal apology. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Janella Hamilton. Vancouver police have announced charges in a downtown stabbing on Cambie Street yesterday. A 61-year-old victim was seriously injured and later released from hospital, according to investigators. As Mira Baines reports, the police chief says the suspect has a history of violence and mental illness.
CBC News has learned a 46-year-old man arrested in the stabbing of a stranger on Cambie Street yesterday had been convicted for uttering threats against Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. Kent Douglas Meads is charged with assault with a weapon, assault, and uttering threats in connection with the recent stabbing. Around noon on Wednesday, police received 911 calls of a man chasing people around with a knife on Cambie near Smythe Street. Vancouver Police Chief Adam Palmer says just 5 days before the attack, Meads was released on probation.
The suspect was released from Fraser Regional Correctional Centre on probation after serving a jail sentence for uttering threats against his own family members and also against prominent federal politicians.
According to court documents, Meads had been sentenced to 148 days in jail. Meads failed to report to his probation officer yesterday morning. Police say things began around 8:40 a.m. when a man was attacked while walking near Seymour and Cordova Street. Minutes later, a glass window was broken near Harbour Centre at a coffee shop. Then at around 11:30 a.m., a man was chased with a knife near Main and Pryor. That was followed by the stabbing attack on Cambie Street. Police didn't have more details, but there was also a later 5th incident before his arrest.
We now believe that the same man is responsible for 5 separate violent and unprovoked incidents that unfolded in downtown Vancouver throughout the morning yesterday.
Police suspect mental health issues in the case. He has spent time in Thailand, according to police, where he was arrested for overstaying his tourist visa and breaking into a bank. Vancouver's Mayor Ken Sim was critical of the federal government and wants an end to what he calls catch and release of repeat offenders.
The reality is, though, that Vancouver continues to grapple with a mental health crisis that requires an all hands-on-deck approach, including the federal government, because this is something that we can't just simply arrest our way out of.
VPD says a strong case has been made to the court to have Meads remanded in custody. Police are urging witnesses or anyone with video to come forward to police. More charges are expected. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Meanwhile, a man has been arrested and released following a violent attack on a senior at Granville Sky Train Station. It happened on March 11th around 3 in the afternoon. Police say the 70-year-old victim was waiting for the train when he heard someone yelling behind him. He was then grabbed and shoved face first into an arriving train. He received treatment for head and facial injuries and needed surgery. Evidence from the scene and witness statements led to the arrest of the suspect. The 34-year-old has since been released with conditions to stay away from all SkyTrain stations and is scheduled to appear in court next Thursday. 3 people in Victoria were injured last night following a collision involving a BC Transit bus. Police say witnesses observed a speeding car run a red light and hit the side of a truck. That truck was then propelled into the front end of a bus. No significant injuries were reported from the bus passengers or driver, but the truck driver suffered serious and possibly life-altering injuries. The driver and passenger of the car had minor injuries. All 3 were taken to hospital. Homicide investigators say a man has been charged with second-degree murder in connection with a woman's death at a home in Vancouver's University Endowment lands last week. 35-year-old Yang Christopher Liang has now been charged in the killing. iHit says the man knew the victim, and investigators believe this may have been a case of intimate partner violence. The case is now before the courts. Surrey parents are once again raising the alarm over the lack of classroom space in schools. 2 schools announced this week they are closing the door to new enrollments for any students living in the area. Our Saurabh Sandhu has more from stressed out parents.
The Surrey school public crisis is hitting a new low. 2 elementary schools, Latimer and Bay Ridge, are saying no to any new enrollment, even to those students living within their catchment. And a 3rd school almost did the same thing, but kept enrollment open only after staggering students' start times.
There is just no more room to put any more portables on. It's just the capacity exceeds the room that we have, and that's so true of so many schools.
The school district says since September it has seen more than 1,500 new enrollments. That's on top of more than 3,000 new students who came into the district the year before.
To announce this in the spring is really an unreal situation.
I hear about parents stressing out because they got their daycare lined up after waiting for 2 years, and now they're worried if they're going to get into the school or not.
The district says those who can't find space within their catchment areas will be directed to other schools, an idea that some say bring its own challenges.
Think about your kindergartner walking half an hour to their school and then trying to volunteer in your classroom to stay connected with that new school community is extremely difficult.
The school district says overcrowding in schools is reaching a critical point, and they are desperately seeking more help from the province to build more schools.
The population growth has been exceptional in Surrey. We're looking at innovative things like prefabricated expansions, modular expansions for schools, for grade schools and high schools.
Surrey District's Parent Advisory Council says currently there are more than 350 portables being used in Surrey School, housing more than 9,000 students. That number is equal to 18 brand new elementary schools. And with Surrey's population expected to cross 1 million mark by 2046, overcrowding in schools is set to become even a bigger challenge for the city to tackle. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Surrey.
The BC government is launching a new flood strategy to help communities prepare for future disasters. It says about $39 million will be invested in dozens of local climate initiatives. The province says local governments and First Nations can use the money for small-scale structural flood projects and improvements to flood mitigation strategies. The Metro Vancouver Regional District is proposing a pilot program that would allow alcohol consumption in 6 additional regional parks. The parks include Boundary Bay, Brunette Fraser Regional Greenway, Campbell Valley Regional Park, Capilano River, Derby Reach, and Iona Beach Regional Park. The pilot program would run from the end of this June to mid-October, with alcohol drinking allowed at any time during park hours. But the Fraser Health Authority is cautioning against the proposal, warning it could increase impaired driving, violence, and over-normalization of drinking. Seniors gathered across the province this afternoon to rally against shrinking pensions, which they say are not keeping pace with the high cost of living. As Michelle Gomez reports, they're calling on the government for better income support.
Tired of being poor. Seniors' rights matters too.
Advocacy group Seniors Tin Cup held rallies in 7 cities across the province today. Over 100 seniors gathered at the march in Vernon.
We're marching because seniors cannot live just on their pensions. It's impossible to live on $1,200 a month.
Rick Wilson gets around $2,000 a month from his pension. He says his wife, who stayed home to care for their children, gets about half of that.
The minute I get that increase, it disappears because your hydro, your phone, your gas, and the things you gotta have. You gotta have your house insurance, you gotta have your car insurance.
In Surrey, a group gathered outside MP Carrie Lynn Finley's office. Organizer Sue Reed says many seniors live below the poverty line, sometimes having to choose between essentials like housing, food, and medication.
I hate to say this, but it's almost like, well, they're older and they're going to die anyway, so why put the money out there? Well, no, they deserve to live their last years with respect and dignity.
The group is asking for the provincial government to index the BC Senior Supplement to inflation and fund other services for seniors like extended health benefits, housing, and transit. They're also asking them to work with the federal government to raise pensions.
That's why we're here, is to get more money in their pensions, just to bring them up to poverty level. We're not asking for any, over that, just poverty level would work for them.
A recent study from the United Way found 1 in 4 seniors in BC live on under $22,000 a year. The province said in a statement inflation has been particularly hard for seniors on fixed incomes. It's working on changes to the SAFER program, which provides rental supplements to seniors. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, White Rock.
Quesnel City Council is condemning a controversial residential school book handed out by the mayor's wife.
With my dad going through residential school, she brought up a lot of stuff. Let me tell you. It was contesting that they didn't exist. They weren't there. Those things are real. They are actually real, and they did happen to Indigenous people who went through the school, right?
Mayor Ron Paul confirms his wife gave out several copies of The Grave Error to residents. The book denies that Indigenous people lost their language and culture and minimizes residential schools' traumatic impact. City Council, including the mayor himself, voted unanimously to denounce the book. His wife did not respond to CBC's request for comment. A BC man who lost more than $700,000 in an investment fraud is thankful that he was able to get his money back. He credits this to the actions taken in a Manitoba fraud case that happened around the same time. Vera Lynn Kubinick reports.
A Vancouver man says he was devastated when he learned a fraudster had taken the money he sent by wire transfer to what he thought would be a safe investment for his business. Alan Landa operates 2 businesses in BC, one in real estate development and the other that sells arcade games all over Western Canada. In November 2022, he was searching for a placement for his investment money to get a good interest rate on it until he would need the money for his business. He got a phone call from someone identifying himself as an investment advisor with a bank. After several calls and emails, Landa decided to invest more than $735,000 through the man in what he thought would be safe investments. He sent the money in 2 wire transfers that went into a bank account of a company named B21 Trade Canada Limited. He later learned the person who contacted him was an imposter, fraudulently posing as an investment advisor at a bank.
I couldn't believe that I blew my nest egg. I just honestly, I wanted to curl up into a little ball and never be seen again.
Around the same time as Landa's fraud case, a similar case happened in Winnipeg to Peter Squire, who lost more than $600,000 in a fraud involving the same company, B21 Trade Canada. Landa was told the bank account was frozen, and he credits actions taken in the Winnipeg case for that.
Every phone call, every word spoken went through my head over and over again, and I kept going, well, that was a red flag. How did I miss that one? Oh my God, how did I fall for this?
When the bank account was frozen, the alleged fraudster could not remove the money, and Landa filed a lawsuit in BC Supreme Court. He succeeded in getting a court order to get his money back.
I would say fraud is very bad right now. I would say it's probably the worst it's ever been.
Sergeant Shiv Gill heads the Vancouver Police Department Financial Crime Unit. He thinks fraud increased during the pandemic when people did more business online.
It's devastating. So the people who are victimized, the emotional impact can be quite severe. They're embarrassed. They can't believe that they fell for this scam, so they have difficulty telling people. I've noticed actually they have difficulty reporting it to the police.
To help reduce the problem, Sergeant Gill says he'd like to see government change banking regulations so that banks and credit unions would be obligated to repay money to account holders if they lose funds through fraud. Vera Lynn Cubanek, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A climate activist from Pakistan who has been in Canada for 5 years on a study permit is hoping federal officials pause his deportation. According to his lawyer, Zane Hawk, who is now married to a Canadian, has been deemed inadmissible because progress on his studies lagged.
We're just trying to get our head around what life in Pakistan will look like. And I think it would be uncomfortable for everyone involved because it would be a huge cultural shock for Sophie.
Hawk was a spokesperson for the group Extinction Rebellion and a co-founder of Save Old Growth. He was convicted of 5 criminal mischief counts related to civil disobedience. His wife applied for a spousal sponsorship to keep him in Canada, but his deportation deadline, April 22nd, is likely to arrive before the application is processed. They're hoping the CBSA uses its discretion to pause the deportation.
What happened to you cannot be undone, but it must be acknowledged and it must be atoned for.
2 men went 68 years thinking they were someone else. Now the Manitoba government has offered an apology for being switched at birth. More when we return. Thank you for joining our commercial-free live stream. It has been 6 months since the war in Gaza began, and Palestinians, Muslims, and Jewish people continue to struggle with what that means for their communities. It is also currently the month of Ramadan, and tonight a Vancouver mosque has invited neighbors of other faiths to join them. Earlier today, the Early Edition Stephen Quinn spoke with 2 faith leaders about how they're bringing their communities together.
How do you bring people together?
I think it is very important to realize that when public discourse becomes so polarized, even the most sincere expressions of goodwill get turned into slogans and get regarded negatively. So, for example, to say, free the hostages, or to say, call for a ceasefire, both of these are expressions of desire for peace and for life-giving action, and we tend to hear them and we tend to imagine that they are a political position. I think that coming together around prayerful language, where we talk about life, we talk about peace, we talk about what it means to all be human beings together in this created world, gives us a chance to step outside of the language that is sloganized.
You say, Haroon, we are just people, and regardless of whether we're Muslim or Jewish or Christian or whatever, but can you actually do that when your faith is so important to you? It's such a part of the way you live.
Well, of course we can. Like Stephen, we belong to the Abrahamic faith. It's all the same line. You know, it's the religion of Abraham, of Moses, of Jesus. You know, Palestine is the birthplace of Jesus Christ. This place is a holy land for all of us. And it should really be a beacon of peace. Yet it's anything but currently. But that's not to say that it can't be. You know, even the most intransigent enemies become allies, and it can happen. It's not impossible, Stephen. And so I think really ultimately the message is that if we can get together a disparate group of people of all faiths, all backgrounds, if they can all get together and communicate effectively, strategically, we can affect the change that we want to see in this world. Be the change you want to see in this world.
They may never know what happened in a small Interlake hospital nearly 70 years ago, but two men switched at birth in the 1950s received an apology from the Manitoba legislature today. One of those men, a resident of Seashelt here in BC. Karen Pauls has more on the apology and the reaction.
What happened to you cannot be undone, but it must be acknowledged and it must be atoned for.
An apology, years, decades in the making.
Richard Bouvet, I am sorry. Edward Ambrose, I am sorry.
Eddie Ambrose, now of Winnipeg, and Richard Beauvais of Seashelt, BC, were born on the same day at the Arborg Hospital in 1955. In 2022, they discovered through a DNA test that they'd been raised by each other's biological families.
There's a big trauma in there. There's a big emptiness in me.
Beauvais was raised in a Métis community and is a residential day school survivor who was taken from his family during the 60s scoop. Ambrose grew up Ukrainian, at one point living with a foster family. He recently got his Métis citizenship. The two men spoke about what it was like to meet for the first time this week.
It's emotional for meeting someone who is you, but I am him. It's a reverse.
We wondered which one was born first and who was older, but he's bald, so he's got to be older. That's it.
This isn't the first case of switched babies in Manitoba.
I just want to know what happened.
Two other sets of men from Northern First Nations found out they were switched at a federally run hospital in 1975.
They want answers. They want answers. They want answers.
Health Canada determined the switches were accidental. Still, Ottawa provided financial settlements and support services to the men and their families.
A mistake was made.
Their lawyer, Bill Gange, is now also negotiating with the province on behalf of Ambrose and Beauvais.
My hope is that we're going to be able to work out a compensation package.
Premier Wab Kinew didn't make any commitments, but
Did tell them as part of the conversation today, we'll be there for the next steps.
the previous Conservative government said the province has no legal liability. It didn't offer an apology or compensation. Meanwhile, the statute of limitations for cases like this has long expired. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Here we have a beautiful time lapse of downtown Vancouver as the sun rose this morning. Darius will have our full forecast coming up next.
My right foot's still quite sore, especially today now, but that'll definitely heal. But I'm quite happy at the progress I've made, so it's healing up nice, and that's little to pay for for a good cause like this. Well, I was looking to get myself back in shape this year, so I decided, homelessness was a very big issue in every community, and I've heard for the last year or so everybody talking about it, but no one doing nothing. So I decided, I can walk, and let's do a fundraiser and see how much money we can raise and help out the people that are homeless. A little over 10,000. So is really good. I appreciate everybody that's given so far. We're going to help a lot of people with this money.
He said instead of walking a mile in their shoe, he was going to walk 100 miles in their shoes. So it's 160 kilometers. So, it's quite a distance to walk. And, first day that he walked, it was just terrible weather. I mean, just terrible. And the wind being the huge component, and it's hard on his body. So after a bit, he got limping along, and he has a lot of grit, and he had to be really persuaded to put a stop to it. He's to be greatly admired for what he's doing.
We made it this far. We did a lot of good things. We're raising money and we're going to help some good people. So that's what it's all about, coming out and doing something and making something happen. I'd do it again, no problem. It's definitely a worthwhile cause, and there's a lot of different causes out there that people can do a little bit to contribute and help out other people. It's like everybody has something they're good at. So if more people got involved and did things to help out, the island would be a much better place for everybody, not just a few. So that's what I'm doing, just trying to do what I can to help out whoever needs the help.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Experience the choral spectacle of the season and celebrate Vancouver's thriving singing community at Corleone's annual singing festival, The Big Roar, April 13th. For tickets and information, visit corleone.org. And never miss a special programming series, event, or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi joins us now with a look at our forecast. Darius, it was a little chillier today, but still such a beautiful day.
Yes, we're going to stay, cooler than we have been, but still a degree or two above seasonal every day except Saturday here in Vancouver and really across the south. Temperatures dropping a little bit Saturday, but Friday and Sunday both looking still decently warm despite that cloud cover. And the sun actually comes out Sunday, so not too bad. But where we have sun entirely over the next few days is in the northern parts of the province. A little bit of cloud clearing out overnight tonight into tomorrow, and then lots of sunshine over the next few days. No precipitation to speak of there. If we focus on the south, though, where there is some activity, you're going to notice a few scattered showers tonight on parts of the island, and then tomorrow morning some more scattered showers. I know that some models are saying that it's going to come to Vancouver. I don't think it will. Tomorrow morning seems like it'll be just cloudy, and it may be an isolated shower, but for the most part, pretty dry. The showers really come late afternoon tomorrow into the evening, and then continue for a little bit, and then taper off overnight before restarting on Saturday, and that's when we see our more consistent rainfall. Saturday is our rain day for a thick band of both the south coast, the lower mainland, and the island. Victoria escapes it a little bit, but they should get some precipitation as well. Meanwhile, in the interior, really depending on where you are, some showers, some of those higher elevation flurries, a little bit of excitement, but overall shouldn't be too much. We're not looking at any significant accumulations of anything anywhere. Some decent snowfall for some of those higher mountains, but for Vancouver's local mountains, as we'll see, it is going to be a lot of rain mixed in with that snow. In terms of temperatures, we are still a degree or two above seasonal for most places today. Similar story tomorrow. Temperatures coming up even more in places like Abbotsford, even though we're missing that sun. Saturday is our cooler day as temperatures drop a little bit before coming up on Sunday as that sun comes out. So overall, not too much excitement across the province. Lots of sun tomorrow in the north and some scattered precipitation in the south. But even the Thompson is high enough far north enough that they're going to be a pretty sunny day tomorrow. Here you can see all that rain coming for the mountains. Not really much snow to speak of in terms of a 5-day forecast. Fairly consistent, but there are some breaks for sunshine in there. So something for everybody.
A little bit of a mixed bag. Thanks so much, Darius.
Thank you, Janella.
That is your late news for this Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For news anytime, head to our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next early edition news starts on CBC Radio 1 at 5:30. Have a great night.